Hi, in this video we'll continue our discussion of earnings per share with a complex capital structure, specifically calculating diluted earnings per share. One thing I didn't mention in the previous video are these other factors here. One thing important to note, sometimes you have a convertible bond where the conversion rate on the dilutive security changes during the period the security is outstanding. So what I mean by that is a convertible bond, say, that can be converted into maybe 8 shares of common stock for a few years period, and then maybe after that it could be converted into 12 shares of common stock. If that is the case, the firm needs to use the most dilutive conversion rate available of the two. So we would use 12. We would assume that the bondholders convert in the later period and they're going to convert into 12 shares for each bond. And that's really because GAAP is fairly conservative in nature. The other thing we didn't discuss was convertible preferred stock. So sometimes you have preferred stock that has an option to be converted into common stock. So that's a dilutive security, of course, and you would have to account for that for diluted earnings per share. The important thing to note is that you wouldn't subtract the preferred dividend from the numerator in earnings per share because you're assuming they convert it, so therefore you don't have to pay the preferred dividend. Okay, let's look at an example again. In 2019, Chase Enterprises issued at par 60 $1,000 8% bonds. Each of these can be converted into 100 shares of common stock. Then Chase, they list their revenues and their expenses other than interest and taxes of $8,400. Let's assume a tax rate of 40%. Okay. Throughout 2020, I guess it's revenues and expense information for the year 2020. That should be made more clear. Anyhow, throughout 2020, 2,000 shares of common stock were outstanding, and none of the bonds were converted or redeemed. So, okay, what is diluted EPS for 2020? And then part B says assume the same facts, except that the 60 bonds were issued in the middle of the year in 2020 rather than in the previous year. Okay, let's do part A first. So to calculate net income, obviously they gave us revenues, they gave us expenses. Okay, so we have income before interest and taxes. They gave us, well, they didn't give us the interest expense, but it's pretty easy to calculate. All right, we have the $1,000 bonds. You have 60 of them, so $60,000 at 8%. They mentioned, and so $4,800 would be the interest. So here we have interest. We have income before taxes here, and then the tax. Did they give us a tax rate? Assume that the tax rate is 40%. Yes, they did. Okay. All right. So income tax expense is just 40% of the $4,300. So net income is $2,580. So now that we have net income, we can do diluted earnings per share. So we'll do basic first. So got net income. The problem didn't mention any kind of preferred stock, so it's just net income minus 0 divided by weighted average number of shares outstanding during the year. So it should be $1.29 per share. Okay, now that we have that, let's do diluted. So again, with diluted, I like the nice big fraction. I'm going to plug in the basic first. Then we're going to account for the effects of this convertible bonds here. Okay. So okay, we have, let's see, $60,000 worth of bonds that pay 8% interest. Each of them can be convertible into 100 shares. So you have 60 of them. They could each be converted into 100. So potentially you have 6,000 more shares outstanding. Now, because these were issued in a previous year, we're going to assume the bondholders exercise their option to convert on January 1st. So we're going to add 6,000 to the denominator. For the numerator, though, we're going to take, okay, 60,000 times 8%, 4,800 We're going to add that to our net income. We're going to multiply it by 1 minus the tax rate. And the tax rate is 40% in this problem. That's going to reflect the money we save by not paying that bond interest. And again, we're going to add 6,000 shares to the bottom. And I don't see any other dilutive securities, so that's going to be that. This is the new, accounting for these two things. Our diluted earnings per share, 68 cents per share. That's important information for shareholders, right? I mean, 129 is nice, but it's roughly a little over half of that when you account for it if these bondholders converted. Okay, let's do part B then. Assume the bonds were issued on September 1st, 2020. Okay. So if that is the case, for net income, it's going to be a little different, right? You get the same setup. You got the revenues, the expenses, but your bond interest is not going to be $4,800 because you're going to take $4,800, you're going to multiply it by 4/12 of the year. You got September, October, November, December. You got 4 out of 12 there. That's all the interest you have to pay. So you're going to have a different income before taxes, therefore different taxes. So net income is $4,500. Okay, so with that in mind, diluted EPS 4,500 divided by the same 2,000. That's basic EPS. And then now, if they had exercised these, their option to convert, we are going to assume they exercise it on the first day they could, which would be September 1st. So we are saving, let's see here, 60 times 1,000, 60,000 times 8%, that's 4,800, times, the 4/12 of the year, that's 1,600. So they're really saving 1,600 times 1 minus the tax rate, of course. It's like they save 1,600, but then they don't save, they anti-save the 40% of that, essentially. 640. So they're going to save 960 net. And as for the bottom, okay, they're each convertible into 100 shares. So instead of writing 6,000 on the bottom this time, because we're going to assume they convert on September 1st, it's going to be 6,000 times 4/12. Okay. And so our diluted earnings per share is $1.37 in this case. Okay, I think that's enough for this video.